backed by funds that amount to $10, $20 billion during good periods. That money's got to get put somewhere, and you need a lot of people to do the interviewing and looking at the business plans and crunching the numbers and sitting on boards and all that. And what happened was there wasn't enough Valley veterans for the jobs. They started getting Harvard MBAs and people like that, kids who had never actually been in a company, but were real good at, analyzing the balance sheets. And a lot of venture capital firms got into a lot of trouble.
The company started out with my own first injection of $3 million so that we went on our own and could do what we wanted. We needed to have a new injection. So looking at new possibilities, one, of course, to try to find a pharmaceutical company that will come in as a partner. But in a stage before, it occurred to me that, a crazy idea, maybe we get a bank to give us a loan because of the unique value of what we do. It's a complete major contribution to health in general. And I began to read about, do I know anybody in the board of a bank? And I found my good friend, Bill Hewlett, in the Chase Manhattan. So I went to talk to Bill, and we went over, he knew what I was doing, went over and they said, "It's extraordinary, Alex, you have an incredible, important contribution to make to medicine. I'll make every effort to have an opening for you to talk to the chairman of the board." And I went and I presented the case, and they put together a combine of 6 banks, and we got a $20 million loan.
I didn't even know what a venture capitalist was in 1969, but I sure found out in a hurry. And from the time that we finally announced that we were going to form a company, which was in the spring of 1969, till the time I actually closed the financing, the stock market dropped over 100 points, and that was a much larger percentage of the total then than it would, of course, be today. But we did manage to persuade some very, very fine venture capitalists, including the Bank of America Small Business Enterprise Company, Hale Brothers Associates out of San Francisco, a group called Schroeder Rockefeller. But my favorite and my ongoing supporter has been the Sprout Group from Donaldson, Lufkin, and Jenrette. And so, after months and months of struggle on $1,505,000, less than it cost a day to buy a stepper, Advanced Micro Devices was formed.
The early 80s proved to be a good time for entrepreneurial startups. Among them were Sun Microsystems, Silicon Graphics, Adobe Systems, and Cypress Semiconductor. Cold War money slowly began to dry up. Venture capital replaced military dollars. But as many learned the hard way, getting a piece of the pie was not easy.
And so Vinod had 2 venture capitalists lined up. We went out and had a Big Mac at McDonald's that night right on El Camino. And Vinod said, "So when you quitting your job?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You can't back out on me now." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "You got to join. We got money now." I said, "You haven't given me a job offer." He said, "Job offer? You're a founder." Oh, no. I went in and quit the next day, and that's how we got going.
Actually, when we raised the venture capital for Adobe, we had a very different business plan than the one that we eventually executed. And I've often remarked, thank God we did not pursue that plan, because we probably would not have survived.
Venture deals are cut very wide range. Our deal was on day 1, I got a check for $7.5 million, and the employees of Cypress retained 25% of the company, 75% disappeared for $7.5 million. And then that 25% has since been distributed to a couple thousand people. I currently, on day 1, I owned 5% of the company, and by the time we came to a public offering, I had been whittled down to about a little under 2%. Today I own about 1% of the company. Our deal is what I would call typical, and it represented a brand new engineer who didn't know the venture game very well doing a vanilla, straightforward deal.
This is the world's capital of venture capital. There are more venture capital firms in Silicon Valley than any other place on the planet. In fact, there are more venture capital companies in one town, Menlo Park, with a town that I happen to be working in, than any other city in the world. So I thought it'd be easy for us to get venture capital. And we got the product halfway built, so we could show a real working prototype. We had great market research, and we went out to the venture capitalists. This was my job. Tom was building the software, and my job was to get the company financed. And boy, I'll tell you, we absolutely struck out. Nobody, we talked to over 25 venture capital firms, and no one wanted to fund this. And no venture capital firm did.
There were no nods, no kick under the table or anything. And it finally got to the point where we realized, if we're serious about doing this, we're going to have to quit. And we're going to have to jump off the bridge and hope that there's warm water below, like people are saying there is. So we did. We resigned, and no business plan. Went to the venture capitalists and said, okay, we've resigned. Now let's talk. And of course, we finally consummated the deal. But I think one of the things that's unique about linear technology, we negotiated $15 million. And for $15 million, we were going to get 30% of the company. And we went home that night and said, you know, we really don't need $15 million to get this thing started. All we need is 5. So we went back the next day and said, listen, can we have 70% of the company if we only get $5 million? And they laughed and said, okay, fine. Okay, we'll do that. And we had a closing dinner, and at the closing dinner, we actually gave them our business plan. The check was already in the mail that afternoon.
When you have no funding, you go to almost any source to try to find it. And so I used a lot of sources. Certainly all the money I'd saved up, plus there was a profit-sharing retirement plan from Bain & Company that I got, and instead of rolling that over, as you should do, I used that money in the company. They invented this thing the banks invented called lines of credit about the same time, and so I could get unsecured lines of credit personally, and I used several of those. I borrowed money from my folks, both my mom and my dad, and ultimately when no one else would, even the business had really tanked and we looked dead, my parents were the one last source where they would still loan me more money for this. And eventually I'd borrowed so much from them, I just said, stop. I can't take any more. You know, if this business goes under, which it looks like it's going to, I don't want to take all of your retirement savings. And then after we struck out with venture capitalists, one of the guys in the company recommended, well, why don't we try going to a few wealthy individuals as opposed to professional investors? And he knew 2 guys, and we went to those 2 guys, and they invested. Now, not a lot, small amount of money, but boy, it seemed like a lot to us then, a total of $151,000. And that allowed us to keep the doors open for 6 months. And so without each one of those, we wouldn't be here today.
We wanted, I think, an $8 million valuation for the company, and we wanted $7 million. So it gave them quite a bit of the company. And so they said, well, the valuation is too high. And the fellow they sent to negotiate, they called Darth Vader. That was their name for him. He came in on a Friday afternoon and he said, we'll give you a $7 million valuation, and we want the whole thing, no partners. I said, Jesus Christ, you know, I thought we all had this understanding already. He said, well, we just aren't going to do business that way. He said, this is Friday, you got till Monday morning. And he got up, he started to leave. And I said, well, wait a minute, come back, sit down. I said, there's something that I can tell you right now. The answer is no. And I got up and walked out. So they left, and then Monday the local guy called me and he said, we like the $8 million ring and we think 3 guys is fine.
We had done well enough at Fairchild that we started the company with our own money. And then after doing that, I called Art and said, hey, we're setting up a company. Would you like to raise some money for us? Art said, sure. Called a few of his friends, and by the end of the afternoon had our first round of financing committed. We just hit it right. It was at a time when venture capital was one of these frenzies. There was a lot of money available. And since we didn't need it badly, it was relatively easy to get. In fact, we never really wrote a business plan.
When we first put our business plan together, we put a 5-year business plan together. In our business plan, it showed in our 5th year we would do $1 billion. And as I took it around to the venture capitalists, they would look at that and they snickered and laughed. And so I said, well, this is ridiculous. I cut it back to a 3-year plan, and so they wouldn't laugh as much. But we did have a vision that we could be a $1 billion company. Not because that was the objective, that was the opportunity. And that we knew the customers, we knew the market, we knew what our product
solution, what solution our product would solve. And we could see the growth of the market would allow us to grow to $1 billion company. In my wildest imagination, however, I did not realize we'd be a 2 or 3 or a multi-billion-dollar company in this time frame. So I had a unique opportunity to come back and talk to the venture capitalists that I had some good news and bad news. The good news is I had Compaq as a customer, and the bad news is I had Compaq as an investor. And so all of a sudden the money from the venture capital wanted to put money into it, but we ultimately never took any money from the venture capital market.
We didn't have very much capital. I think we started out with about $500. But we were able to move on and earn enough. Both our wives, I married shortly thereafter, and both our wives were working, and so they really supported us. Our primary interest was to get something to bring some money in the door. We tried all kinds of things. We tried building diathermy machines, shocking machines to make people lose weight, a device to tune harmonicas.
Many found themselves rich with ideas, but poor in luck. Capturing the interest of a serious investor was not easy.
When Oracle was formed in 1977, venture capitalists wouldn't spend a dime investing in software. And in fact, I can recall talking to a couple of venture capitalists, and in fact, I can recall not talking to a couple of venture capitalists. I was left waiting in their anterooms. When they heard the investment was about software, they wouldn't even see me. In fact, their receptionist would search my briefcase before I left to make sure I hadn't taken a current copy of Business Week with me as I left the room. But Oracle was started without a dime of venture capital. I put in $1,200. The other two guys put in $400 each. And with that $2,000, we started Oracle.
I funded Atari with $250 and grew it, not because I thought that was a nifty way to start a company, but because venture capital was not available to me. I mean, it may sound ludicrous at this point in time, but people thought the idea of playing games on a television set was the stupidest idea they'd ever heard of.
For initial financing, we had zero. I was able to borrow, I think, $2,500 from the bank. Gene borrowed $2,500, and the other four, I think, borrowed around $1,500 each. So we had around $10,000 to start, and everybody said, "You're crazy." In fact, one of the founders walked out of one of the early meetings we were having and said, in fact, it was kind of funny because I was asking about some lab arrangements, and I turned to him and I said, "What do you think about this?" And his face kind of went pale, and he said, "I think you're all crazy," and got up and walked out of the room. So we had to find another electrical engineer.